Hello, this is Dr. Mike. This is from my CIS 2642 pen testing class, and this is taking a look at Topic 5, which is vulnerability scanning. At the time of this recording, this is Chapter 4 of the textbook, the Pen Test Plus Study Guide. And so we'll take a quick look at the slide deck. I'm not going to go through the entire chapter, of course. Maybe we'll look at the summary. What we're going to do is talk about the aspects of vulnerability scanning within your pen test. And then we'll do a separate demo on some of the tools and ways to use those. So anyways, we'll take a look at the slide deck here. And our objectives here, of course, is looking at vulnerability scanning. So now before we go into this here, you see there's already requirements. Scope, rules of engagement, and your time. Those are three things from your contract. If you're not clear on, you want to be clear on these because this can actually start with an early recon. But again, if we looked at our process flow here, we're looking at vulnerability scanning here. I mentioned before, you're going to get some times when recon is going to almost cause that. Like with the last demo, I talked about Burp Suite, and actually we'll demo that again, but we'll do the pro version. And then it can sort of bring forth from passive recon possible vulnerabilities. But just be aware that your contract rules of engagement might dictate how you go about actual true vulnerability scanning. So this is going to be more active, of course. We're going to be hitting the systems, hitting the target with various tools. Burp, Nessus, Zap, and Map are some example tools here. So be aware of scope and rules of engagement. Example here is of course, how time, and then we'll come back to time in a second. When do I scan? So I've had clients where they said, I want you to actually scan us on the weekends or after 7 p.m. weekdays and so on. So be aware of that. And also, again, be aware of your scope. It could be your IPs, your domains, and so on. It's easy to fall out of scope. So you have your IPs, and you know when you need to scan those IPs or domains. And also when and how. Some of these scanning tools can be very aggressive and very impactful to the client. So we're going to look at ways, of course, to make a more effective scan. And actually, we'll look at that here in this video. And that will help you both with of course, with time. Time, of course, being the overall time you have to scan, but also the time for the entire engagement, entire timeline. Recon and vulnerability scanning can take up a large chunk, especially if any kind of scanning tools can take a lot of time up. You can chew up way more time than you expected, and your end date's showing up before you know it. So we need to make sure that we use these items to help us have effective scanning. So anyways, we'll take a look at here. Beyond that, of course, it could be regulatory environments or sort of regulatory things in place. This is a regulatory scan. This, of course, will be called out in your scope. An example of that would be a PCI scan, things like that. Some scanning utilities, like Nessus, for example, actually have pre-built scanners that will scan for like Sarbanes-Oxley or PCI. These different FIPS-based scanning, things like that. So, anyways, so that's really important that you just don't jump in and just start blasting everything you have. Some of these scans come on for a long time. This is one of the things I mentioned before. It's sort of come out in the Zen of pen testing. You might run some stuff. In fact, I think this topic here, you'll do OpenVAS, which is a great utility. So example on that lab, it's a great lab. You work through the lab, learn to use a tool, but it's a very confined, small scan in a lab environment. I've started scanners like Nessus, and they'll run for 8 hours or more. And this is where I'm going to talk about before. This is going to help you set up your scan correctly. But ideas, identify your targets, of course. We're looking for scan targets. We're looking for any type of data, network. A lot of big one, of course, here is services offered by the system and in-time exposure of the network system, of course. And this will come out in your early recon possibly, but it could also come out in your actual scanning. This is a big one here, production versus test. Now, you should not be doing anything with development environments. It's possible it's all you have. It could be an internal security professional, you're working with internal clients. They want you to scan development. The problem with this is no matter how much, let's clear it out the board here. No matter how much they tell you, this will never equal this. No matter how hard you try, there's never an exact match. And sometimes there's fear of scanning production. A way to alleviate that fear is to the point that the attacker is going to use these tools. So that's what you're doing, right? You're running as the attacker. If they're going to run these tools against production, why shouldn't we? And they don't care. They don't care about rules of engagement, and they have all the time in the world. So, it's a uphill battle of defense, and being pushed back to a test or development environment for only security vulnerability scanning is definitely a negative on the defensive side. All right. So asset maps, so I'm going to pass this. Frequency, I'm going to pass that. Realize that you can set these things up to run. Example here we see with Nessus. This is more for an internal tool, but it could be if you're an external client, you want to scan over a long engagement. Maybe you want to scan every day at a certain time. You might as well go ahead and set this up to run overnight while you're sleeping. You have that thing kick off early in the morning, things like that. So, and reports. We're going to come back to reports. This is going to be one of those things where, okay, I'll talk about real quick here. As we do this, we get data coming out. The side effect of this here is our data. It could be just copy-paste data from terminal output, like Nmap. It could be XML files, like Nmap, for example. Vulnerability scan also is going to provide us a lot of data. So, reports. We're going to look at reports. We'll look at reports as we talk a little more further down here. These are great. A lot of this information and reports will go into your final report. Don't forget that is one of your aspects of a pen test is your final report in your notes. So all this stuff dumps into your notes. And the best part is some of these reports, especially like Burp Suite, if you need to make a summary of what a cross-site scripting is, you don't have to start from scratch. Copy and paste the information from Burp Suite. Put the full report maybe as an attachment, and maybe put links to best practices. So now here's something you need to consider. Different vulnerability tools might have different ways of gauging vulnerabilities. So Burp Suite might have, critical, high, medium, low. Nessus might have, different levels. So the more tools you bring in, the more difference you might have. One might call a critical versus a priority one. So there's this mapping that usually happens. Hopefully not too bad, but just realize that it could cause some confusion. If you just report it as is, in your final report, you might say Nessus showed a high, and then Burp Suite showed the same thing as a critical. Maybe those are the same in your eyes, but to the client, they might say, "Wait a minute, what's high versus critical? Why these using different terminology here?" So it might be good to level set that. Maybe at the beginning of the report, say everything that is a critical, I'm going to call critical. So let's keep that in mind. All right. So again, risk appetite, requirements, technical constraints. It's a big one right there. If you're scanning from a web-based, maybe you have a cloud-based instance, maybe you're working on a larger company that has cloud-based scanners. It's going to allow you some more freedom to kick those off. It could be a constraint on your end. It could be if you're running from home. Maybe your home network only allows so much network issues on your end. Licensing limitations. Keep that in mind. Some of these tools are professional licensed. Sometimes you can get away with like educational or beginner licenses. Burp Suite, for example, you can get a trial license, and definitely suggest you do that. Usually it's assigned to something. You always ask if you can get one. Never hurts to ask. Look at their documentation for that. I won't do that here. But also, for example, Nessus. I have Nessus not installed on this system, but on a different one, and I have sort of the beginner's edition Nessus. It's free. It only allows up to 16 IPs. Well, I ran into a problem where I've used them for fewer engagements, and you can't sort of clean it out. It has to age out over time, and then it sort of resets itself. So keep that in mind. Licensing could be an issue. And also just check your licenses if you do have commercial software. Make sure you don't end in the middle of your engagement. That would be a bummer. So, okay, we're going to talk about scoping. Move on past that. But again, this might set sensitivity levels here. So this is a view of Nessus, and it shows there's different types of things. You can go in and configure how you want to scan. So we'll also want burp too. But here's the thing. So now we're looking at this. Disabling unused plugins. So knowing the scope, not just what IPs, but also what operating systems do I have. Now this either will come directly from the client, if it's more of a white box test. If it's a black box, your recon should feed you this. Knowing what OSs they are, when I go in to set up my scan, it's going to help me set up my scan parameters. So for example, they show for Nessus, you can turn on or off certain things. So if I'm not working with Windows, for example, if this is all Linux, then I can turn all Windows plugins off. It takes some time. Uncheck stuff, check stuff. Sometimes you got to read in what some of these plugins are. But there are, as we saw here, there might be host-based scans where you can say, give me a Windows host or a Linux host, maybe it's a malware scan. And actually, I think if you actually look at, here's PCI quarterly external scan, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Mobile device scans and so on. So if you're working with cloud, you can start with one of the built-in templates, and you can sort of work from there, or just take a basic network scan and add to it. So it might be better to take something more basic and add to than go in and try to remove. There's a lot of plugins, especially when it comes to Nessus and something like OpenVAS. So again, here you can see there's no reason I need to run any of these other tools if it's Windows. So it's a great example. It's vice versa for my little scratch pad here. So that's all. So it's going to help you get your scan, and that will help reduce your time. The more time you can spend on this, it's a good trade-off. You might spend an hour here, and this is not scientific by any means, but it could buy you, 3 or plus hours of scan time of going down. So a little bit of time here, maybe I think a 1-to-3 ratio. I didn't even looked at that myself, so that's all unscientific. But normally though, and it makes sense, the more time you spend prepping, the less time you spend with a useless scanning. So you can shorten that window there, get rid of some of that. And it also is going to allow you to, as you're seeing here, as you find vulnerabilities, going back to recon is very normal. So during scanning, if it's ability, you might find a possible vulnerability. You might need to go back to some more recon to verify it. You might check in the vulnerability, look at it more, look at the exploit details, and find yourself going back to recon again, looking for more information, or going back for more vulnerability scanning, but just you're not sure about if it's an exploit or not. So there's a lot of arrows here I got, but that's why I can look at it here. So let's talk about that. So how do we get this information from? So data from your results, and now I'm going to talk about reports. So for example, here we have good old Nmap vulners scan. This is fantastic, and you can download the vulners NSC. This is a Nmap scripting engine, NSC. And for example, you can see here it says, hey, on port 53. So here I did the SV, which is a service I think of a service version, but I added -- script vulners, and I put my target inside there, and you can see it says, you know what, based on my results, I think these vulnerabilities are in play. So CV 2015, let's copy that out here and look for that. We got CV details. I looked, there's Tenable right there, and Nessus, see what that shows us. Okay, cool. Actually, we'll keep that. All right. So you might find more information about it here. OpenGP key, name ISV by, and so on. Allow remote text called denial of service. So, for example, denial of service. This is one that is definitely at a very good chance is not going to be in scope. So, what I can do here is find that data from CVE. May I find the CVE here? I got lists to different Fedora projects, support Apple, McAfee, and so on. But you can see here, just off here, denial of service from a crafted DNS response. That's going to be the end of my rope there. So if we look again, if we look at our thing here, maybe it's a possible vulnerability. I might run another vulnerability scanning tool to verify I find the same results. Maybe not just Nmap, maybe Burp Suite or Nessus or OpenVAS or something. If I can get maybe 2x on that to show that's a possible vulnerability, I am not going to be able to exploit that though, because it's not in the scope. And as probably the one thing I've encountered is very, very, very rarely do I have any type of, yes, you could throw a DDoS against us and see what happens. They don't want you trying to take your system down. So that sort of ends it. You take that information, it goes into your notes, which goes in turn to the final report. So in your notes, keep these links. Keep those links. You don't need to try to reinvent the wheel. Here's a fantastic CV report. Look at this. This is great. I can take this. It's got CVSs vectors, which we'll look at in a second here, which is right here. And it's got links from this report here. This is from the scanner report to other information type CVE, the source of a MITRE. That'd be a good one to open a new tab. MITRE is a good source. So there's CV details. So what you do is you have official documentation, maybe two tools at least, or if one shows positive results. In this case, I can't go any further. It's out of scope, but I have links. Save these links, put them in your notes, copy and paste some of this stuff here, copy and paste that description, throw it in your notes. It can be great to copy and paste into a report. So that's a great result there to look at. Now, CVE data is definitely one you want to look at. Again, usually just Google it like I did here. You might find sources, but CVE data. So where does this information come from? Again, from our scan results. So let's look at our burp scan here. So this is an example, I'll zoom in here, of a burp scan result from Professional. Off the bat, this is a fantastic, it's an HTML report, which you can dump to PDF, or actually it's a self-contained HTML, which is pretty awesome. So it's not a very chaotic HTML with a lot of subdirectories and stuff. It's literally one big HTML document. It can be very big. But look at this, SQL injection. Wow, so that's SQL injection. Click to there. Look at this. It actually tells you the 3 URLs off the main URL, category filter, category product and stock, and so on. And usually will be links to those URLs there. Issue background. This is fantastic. Remediation. This is great. This kind of stuff as a client would want to know, okay, you found this is horrible. How can I remediate it? References. Look at this. Web security, SQL injection cheat sheet, Web Security Academy, possible CWEs, and so on. So again, you can copy and paste that right to the report, and I have no issue copy and pasting that into a report. It looks great. So also, let's lean on our best practices. OWASP. Very good chance you could be doing web-based, but not just web-based, but also some of this stuff can happen on mobile. It could be more, maybe networks, client-based, but a lot of times you'll find stuff here in OWASP. So injection, number 3. And what you have here is take this here, and you can put that in your notes, and look at this, best practices, prevention cheat sheet. Bam, this is fantastic. Look at this. Now you're talking in developer here. So if they're using .NET, they know what to look for. If they're using C# or .NET's prepared statements, they know how to fix this. So these are the kind of things you can, again, stick in your notes. Put the link in your notes for now. It's very simple, easy to keep. And later on, you can maybe either put that link into best practices. So again, it's OWASP. But now if we look at Other sources. CV details, of course, talked about that. CVSs, I didn't have the site for this. CVSs, so they show an example here, right here. The CVSs is scored a specific way. It's scored by how the attack happens. So the access vector, is it local area network? Is it adjacent network? Is it in the network? Is it logical? The complexity. And of course, some of these are going to be, most of them will be given for you, but if you find a brand new vulnerability, you might want to give it a CVSS score. You can use this sort of way to give your own score for it. This has some guidelines for examples. There's stuff that might fall between both. It's your determination what makes sense. In reality, you're not going to really probably score your own. You probably use this to determine the effectiveness of it. And what this does is this tells me it's network based. Now, if it was local only, if it was a physical based attack only, well, this becomes from high to very it's a high, but as in the scope of my test being a network based attack, if it's only adjacent network, that might lower the criticality of it to my client. So this is going to help you. Is there any computational impact, any integrity impact, availability impact? Yeah, because we know this is a DDoS. So it's a great way to see what kind of authentication is needed. If it's adjacent network and it needs authentication, it's very complex. It usually brings the score down. So the CVSS is a great way to work with CVE. Both together are going to allow you to get an overall idea about the links to the issue. And having a CVE is great because it shows it's official. This is not something I made up. Here we have some examples of known affected configurations. That's a good one there. If you know certain configurations are affected by it, that's very important because it could be that maybe the configuration is not there. So, anyways, yeah, burp reports are fantastic. I lost my burp report. There it is. That's not it. There it is. So this will show up in burp also. Even better though is you can actually go into each request. So let's say, I found a SQL injection. Here's why I found it. That's even better. Look at that. On the URL, on the get call, there was an injection test here, and it worked. So, and you can see it. So this is fantastic. So burp is a great tool for this. Zap will do something very similar. So in case you can't pay for license for Burp Pro. And of course, Nessus has reports too. They don't show too many example reports here, do they? Yeah, these are just reports. Nessus creates reports too that you can output, I think in HTML format and PDF. I know PDF for sure. So, anyways, let's move on here. Very important, if you do have something like Nessus, you want to update your plugins. This applies to more Nessus and OpenVAS. A plugin is almost like an antivirus, right? It's like an antivirus. It's a library of known updates, of known issues, known vulnerabilities. So if you're, very first thing you do is make sure your stuff's up to date, both OpenVAS and or Nessus, and there's ways to do it within there. Again, we talked about this already before. The two I would look more for these two right here. They're great to keep those together. One for overall information, one for more details to help you determine if it's the criticality in the context of your engagement. So, so there's stuff here I'm gonna skip past this. I'll say one thing. The chapter talks about more life cycle, and maybe important to recognize that if a company says just do a security scan once and we're done, we're secure, it's usually not the case. It needs to be done every so often. Remediation, testing, detection, and dashboards and criticality. So I'm not going to go with the dashboards. Prioritizing remediation. Again, probably the biggest thing is risk. If something's lower informational level, this is where we get into our timeline, the Zen of pen testing. It might be worth just noting and moving on. Focus more on, of course, the more severity, higher severity and higher the actual exposure of the vulnerability. And this is where CVSS is going to help with. So what's the severity? What's the exposure of it? Exposure maybe being the actual attack vector. How's it coming in? Is it coming in network? If it is what I'm testing part of this exposure? So some of those things you hear, you've seen in a lot of things. The threat vector, attack surface. You can bring into government here. Oops, barriers of scanning. Again, I talked to you before. It's possible that you might hit, when you do scan them, it's going to cause some impact. So always leave it out there. Err on the side of caution and say there could be impact from my scanner. Give me your IP address or the IP address where you're scanning from, so they know that. They don't block it. But overall, commitments and so on. So just I realize I'm just going back. It's sort of the last slide there. It's sort of going back. We're looking at scope, right? Scope, rules of engagement. So we know those already before we started. So again, we have a lot of this data coming out. Besides CV incident severity, you can search exploit DB. You can search for CVE right there. So what was that one? 2015, 5986. 2015, 5986. Now you're thinking, why would you care about 2015 vulnerability, or why would you want to search for it here? This file doesn't show up inside here. So let's look at a more advanced search here. Yeah, nothing there. Okay. What this might help you find actual exploits. So what we're doing is we're arming ourselves for the next step here. So again, we'll close that. The burp scanner is great. This will give us URLs to look at. So again, burp says there's a possible injection here. We're taking information from CVE, probably not from CVE. Let's look at the CVE number, leave that up. We'll close that. What we're doing is, let's close, oops, erase. We're taking stuff from here. Let's go ahead and everything. From our vulnerability scanner, we're staging ourselves for exploit verification and testing. So again, a lot of information's come out. We got information in our notes. The CVE number, I can go in, I can look for the details. If it is a possibility, I might actually search for an exploit. Let's see if there's any here we can look for. There we go. Let's just go to the home exploit here. All right, let's find one here. It's a download exploit, vulnerable application, and it's verified. So search through these current exploits here. All right, so here is vulnerable application. So easy chat server 3.1. This is a remote stack buffer overflow. Okay. So there's some things about exploit DB. Actually might give you shell code, or in this case, code to actually try. You might be able to use this, and even better is, let's go back and see if we find something. Actually, let's go back. Whoops. Back to that one. You download the exploit, view it in a raw. It might actually already be in things like Metasploit. That's what I'm looking for right there. So let's go back and let's click on here. This is verified. So Wi-Fi mouse. This is great. Wi-Fi mouse remote execution. So these exploits you might actually find in. So what you do is you can maybe look for this. There's no CD for it. Windows, since it's exploit DB verified. It's gonna be hit and miss. But what you're looking for is there's a possibility that you might be able to find some of these exploits within an exploit platform model, almost like Metasploit. So exploit DBs can help you do that, and if not, maybe give you some idea about exploit itself. Now we'll look at that later. Right now, you're not going to kick off any of the exploits. What you want to do is go back to my stick guys here. Again, what we want to do is we want to arm ourselves with information to build possible exploits from our vulnerability scan. And the last thing we'll wrap up here is there could be something here you find that is like, it's fire, man, it's good stuff, Vulnerability scanner finds you have SQL injection right now. It could be you might have in your contract. You want to get that out early. Get the information to the client ASAP, and then move it into your exploit. Tell them that you haven't tested the exploit yet, but if this is true, this is a huge deal. So that's all. We want to make sure we keep that information there. So we got tools, we got data from the tools, and Metasploit is going to come into play here. Metasploit also has scanners. Maybe we'll demo that later. I use more of this as an exploit framework, but you can do end mapping and things within Metasploit vulnerability scanning too. I'm going to leverage more of the external tools for that. So in any case, that should wrap up what we're looking at here for our exploit testing. Or vulnerability scanning, I'm sorry. Exploit testing. Our vulnerability scanning, and we'll leave it there. Thank you.